My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Taking care of kids, senior loved ones, and yourself can already be stressful, and adding new fall routines into the mix can make it feel impossible. Remember, it's okay to ask for help. There's a reason why 29 million families have turned to Care.com. Care.com helps you find background-checked sitters, nannies, and senior caregivers who can help with everything from watching kids after school to senior meal prep. Find care that fits your budget and schedule with Care.com and get the help you need.
Let's talk about something that's not always top of mind, but still really important: life insurance. Why? Because it offers financial protection for your loved ones and can help them pay for things like a mortgage, credit card debt. It can even help fund an education. And guess what? Life insurance is probably a lot more affordable than you think. In fact, most people think life insurance is 3 times more expensive than it is. So with State Farm Life Insurance, you can protect your loved ones without breaking the bank. Not sure where to start? State Farm has over 19,000 local agents that can help you choose an option to fit your needs and budget. Get started today and contact a State Farm agent or go to statefarm.com.
Pursuing your future doesn't end at 40. In fact, it may mark the beginning of knowing who you are, what you're capable of, and what you really want. But knowing what's next and how to get there can be a challenge, especially when old narratives play on repeat. Liberty Road is here to share stories so that you can consider your possibilities, pursue your purpose, and move into your future with intention. I'm your host, Netta Jones, and we're here to listen, learn, and liberate dreams, one episode at a time. Well, hello, Liberty listeners. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Road. Today, I get to talk with somebody that I haven't spoken with in a really long time, Joy Cho of OhJoy. And when I launched my entrepreneurial conference in 2000, I think it was 10, Joy was one of the first people that came in and supported us with her expertise and all the budding things she was doing at the time. And that was a long time ago, so I'm excited to catch up with her here. Joy, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
I remember it was the first conference we had done at the time. Again, I was focused on entrepreneurship. I had written a book and I was consulting at the time. And to have somebody like you come and join was really one of those, like, women really do help women. This is awesome. And I appreciated it then, and I appreciate you being here now.
It's so good to see you again. It's so crazy. Yes. When you said 2010, I didn't think it was that long ago, but here we are.
Here we are. I mean, we've seen each other once since then. We grabbed coffee at La Mille in Silver Lake.
Yes.
And you were starting to think more and more about what was next, because really we had come to know and love you as a blogger. And I think you had started to expand your world. So let's get into that for those people who don't know, the few people who don't know who you are or what you've been up to. You did start as a blogger, and now you are a multi-hyphenate, right?
Well, I actually started as a graphic designer.
Yes.
And I started my design business in 2005, sort of at the same time as I started a blog. The blog was really for fun. I was in between jobs and I was trying to start freelancing before my next full-time job came. But the crazy thing about the blog was that it ended up becoming this marketing tool for what would become the first incarnation of OhJoy 1.0, which was a design studio, which was a company that did graphic design and took on clients. And we did a lot of branding and packaging and website design and things that I was capable of doing from my previous experience for other companies. The blogging part of it, I think, didn't really become a focus until a few years later where I was sort of starting to merge it. It was starting to grow. Blogs were becoming a thing. And then by the time I had my first daughter in 2011 is when I had told all of my design clients, when I come back from maternity leave, like I'm focusing on OhJoy, the brand. And really from then on is when OhJoy became more of a lifestyle brand where I was starting to do social media content. I was starting to partner with more brands to do licensed products. I started writing books. I started doing business coaching and teaching workshops to other small business owners. And so a lot of that stuff I still do today, but it took a while. I mean, it was from 2005 to 2011-ish that I didn't really focus on OhJoy, my own brand, for a bit. I was really still doing a lot of work for other people while growing my brand in the very beginning.
And do you think that that allowed you to keep the blog organic, that you weren't focused on how am I going to become, in essence, a media company, right? How am I going to do this and ultimately collaborate and work with other brands? But you were just sharing your story and what you did as a graphic designer and a newly married woman. And do you think that was part of the magic?
For sure. There was a lot of things that were part of the magic back then. I think it was because being a blogger was a new thing. Nobody was doing it professionally in the very beginning until I think 2007, 2008. That's when a lot of the bloggers that you know of, that you probably still follow today on some form of social media, started and started becoming really popular and growing, and people were seeing that it could be a thing. And I think that, because it was organic and also because it was new. And I think same thing with social media these days. I think it's so different because we see what's possible. We see success stories, but we also, now people have a better idea of how much work it is. Also, people go into it seeing that you could get brand deals and they say, oh, great, I'll just become an influencer and get brand deals. It's a different world, and not necessarily in a worse way, but it's just we're coming from a different place now. And so the way that I have to look at my work as it relates to social media is very different than I did back then. And I would say every day it evolves and changes and grows because I have to learn also how to adjust. And when I also work with a lot of my, I call them my students, but other small business owners who I work with, who I mentor, what I tell them now is so different than what I would have told this same group 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because we are evolving and changing in the way that social media works with our businesses.
That just means you're really good at what you're doing, that you're paying attention, right?
I'm trying.
Yeah, no, you are. I think another thing that was interesting about your early success, you were really one of the first people that exploded on Pinterest. And that was huge. I mean, I think for the longest time, it was like you had the largest Pinterest following.
I still do. Surprisingly, I still do.
That's crazy.
It was weird because basically, I had met one of the founders at a conference, Alt Summit, which still goes on today.
Yeah.
But one of the very early years, I had met one of the founders, and I got introduced to Pinterest before, the very early days. And I was part of sort of like the initial group that got to test it out and got to invite people. Yeah. There was a time when it was invite only in the very beginning, and you could only invite a handful of people. And so when I got introduced to it, I was on board right away. I joined it very early. And once it became public and everyone started using it, my following just grew very fast. And the following on Pinterest over there is a little bit different. It's not as interactive as it is on maybe Instagram, where people are commenting. It's not about the interaction. It's really more of, does somebody like your aesthetic, and do they like your taste, and do they like what you're pulling from all around the internet? And if they do, then they're going to follow you. And to me, I still love it. I mean, it's been many years later now. It's still one of my main areas of social media that I work on regularly. It's great for brands who want a visual presence. You don't have to say a lot. Like, it's great if you're not really huge into captions. You should caption things to make them search friendly, but it's one of those things where you don't have to be as emotionally involved in it as I feel like we have to be on Instagram. Sure. So I would say that's still one of my main social media outlets.
And do you think when you talk about all the changes that have occurred, do you think that Pinterest might be one of the few that's in some ways remained the same?
I think that the overall tool and what you use it for has remained the same. In a very cool way, I think it's sort of become a more curated Google in the sense that now that so many people are on it and everyone's feed is so different depending on who you are and who you follow, just like anything else. I think that if you're looking for something that you're not sure is current or if it exists or you saw something somewhere but you have no idea who made it, a lot of times I go there first because it's just going to be a more curated experience than the vast realm of doing a Google search. Also, there's little features, and these are things I test out. There's little features where you can take a picture of something and you can bring it into Pinterest, and there's like a little magnifying glass where it can search all of Pinterest for things that look like that. And it's great. There's like little tools like that. I think that every site has evolved and has changed over the last decade, partially because of algorithms, partially because these companies want to make money. They want brands to pay to advertise, to be able to, all of that, all things that we understand and make sense. So everything to me feels a little bit less natural and organic, and it does feel like we have to work harder everywhere right now for people to see our content. And I think it's the nature of growth. When you have a lot of people on a site, it's just the nature of you're competing with more people and there are more eyeballs, and how's it supposed to work? And also the evolution of things changing. Just like how blogs were huge back in the early 2000s, they're not as huge anymore. Some people still have very successful blogs. I think certain genres do really well still with blogging and long form content, but we have to always be evolving and realizing that something like this, it's never going to stay exactly like this.
Yeah.
And being flexible with that.
Yeah, which is hard. I think it's hard just when you hit your stride as a business, as a brand new brand, as a company that's found success in a specific area, to then all of a sudden have that taken away or shift for whatever reason is really hard. How do you constantly stay up on what's next and those things? You were talking about how things are, you didn't use the word more curated, but less organic than they used to be, which is also interesting because everybody now who's doing things that are a little bit more raw seems to be getting more attention.
Yes.
Do you think that's a return to something that was missing?
Yes, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing because I think when a lot of us started very unsophisticated with just whatever we had, and then there was a time where everything got very curated, very professional. I remember the days when I used to hire a videographer for my sponsored videos on YouTube and the rate that I would pay, and now nobody wants that type of video. Nobody wants that beautiful, pristine, beautiful camera. They want me on my iPhone and it's just vertical and it just it turns into a reel or whatever that is. And it's interesting. I like both parts. I love somebody just being able to get on their phone and share something and they don't have to worry too much about their hair and makeup, or they don't have to worry too much about all the stuff, and people appreciate the realness of it. But sometimes I also just miss a beautiful still image or something where you can just take it and see it, and you don't have to be doing a million different motions, or it doesn't have to always be a video. And I see people going back to blogging. I see some bloggers who still have their sites and they'll still post there, or they'll say, hey, I'm posting here again, just like a lot of people have started Substacks. And that's sort of going back to sort of what we found in long form content, the joy we found in long form content. People are going to Substack for that. So it's we're never going to fully go back to what things were because we are here where we are, and the way we consume information is so different. But it's going to be ebbs and flows. It's just like fashion cycles where certain things come back. I think people get tired of certain things after a while, and then they want something else. And things are constantly changing again. And it's frustrating, I know, as a small business owner, because like you said, I remember days where I could post something on Instagram and I guaranteed a certain number of likes. I knew I would at least have this number of likes. Now, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea if something is going to do really well. I have no idea if it's going to do terrible. And I really am in a place where I am trying more and more to not be as concerned about it. Yes, it is hard to say that when you either are working with a brand where it doing well is sort of part of the job. It's also tough if you just want to continue to grow because you use your platform to either raise awareness or help promote your services or your products. But I also think that the stress of watching the numbers and the likes and thinking about it every single time inhibits my creativity as well. And I've been really trying, especially post-COVID, we all went through different realizations and things that happened in our lives during that time. I'm really trying to see social media as a place that I get to be. I get to be here. I get to have this audience that I've grown over time. Whether it's increasing, whether it's decreasing, whether they're all seeing my content or not, whoever happens to see it, whoever happens to be scrolling that day and see something that I'm sharing, I still get to reach those people, which is something that I would not have had if I did not start it in the first place. Sure. And so during the days that I'm frustrated or I'm feeling like, I just want to quit the internet, because I've had those days many times, I also have to remember the great things that I have also found from it in the sense of community and this connection that we can have with people who live nowhere near where we do. I really try to focus on that, because otherwise we could see it as a thing that's sucking us in, and we're constantly doom scrolling and all of those. And not everything is black and white. There's a lot of grays, and I think we have to find the best parts of these various tools that work for us.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, especially from somebody who has found so much success in it, to be able to step back and just say, well, wait a minute, what is this actually doing for my creativity? What is this doing for the audience I serve? They're tuning in, the ones who see it, because the algorithm is what the algorithm is. The ones who see it that day are the people that you're serving. It's not the ones who don't. And so when we start to try to serve those who aren't there, we completely miss the people who have been showing up, who have been loyal, who are there because of what you have to offer. And on the flip side, if you're not offering that because you're so worried about how do I make this thing work instead of how do I show up creatively as the person that they came to see, then you've sort of defeated the purpose. But it does take that like standing way back and getting a different perspective of what this tool is and how it can be used. For those listening, and I am mindful that we have women in their 40s and 50s and 60s who are in this midlife period wondering what's next for them. Perhaps they have a career and they're just not feeling fulfilled, or they want to have more impact. And they think, I want some sort of long form way of connecting with people. And to start a blog right now might not make the most sense. Joy, what's your recommendation? What would you say to those people who feel like they have something to say and want to figure out how to show up?
Well, Substack does well for a lot of people. I think that, and I have a Substack. It's one of those. We're going to
talk about your Substack.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I learned this after starting my own Substack because people have approached it in different ways. I've seen OG bloggers from back in the day totally just transfer over there, and that's where they're doing it, and they have the ability, and for those of you who don't know what Substack is or how it works, but basically if you subscribe to somebody, you can it can be free, or you can choose to pay, and you get more posts if you pay, whatever is the person sets up, the writer sets up. But what makes it, I think, more user-friendly in many ways than a blog is that it emails you everybody's posts, right? So you're not having to actively go to someone's site the way we did back in the day on blogs. And so people are just finding it as an easier way to share information and get information. And there's an entire community over there that is its own thing. People within Substack are fully embracing, supporting each other, conversing, having chats. It's a whole other world over there. And I see it just like anything else. It's like saying, I want to start a YouTube channel. I want to start an Instagram account. I want to go onto Patreon. There's so many things. And the thing that I've learned that I haven't always followed, but to me is really what part of the secret is you have to dedicate yourself to that platform, and you have to consistently put out new things, whether that's images or posts or videos, whatever the platform is. Because if you're going to do it, but you're just going to dabble in it, it's really, really hard to grow. And I can say this from somebody who has a decent following on a couple of platforms. But when I start a new thing, if I just start TikTok or Substack or anything new, it is a constant for me to have to bring the audience that I have over to a new platform. Now, if I really believe in it and I'm doing a lot of stuff over there and I'm doing things over there that are different than what they're getting wherever they're currently following me, I have a higher chance of bringing them over. But if I'm just sort of half-assing it and just dabbling in it and just doing it a little bit here and there, or I'm just repeating content, then why are they encouraged to sign up to follow me or what I'm doing somewhere else? Just one more thing. And so the people that I see doing really well on Substack have a lot to say. It's definitely long form. It's definitely meant for people who can write. So it's not for every Instagrammer who is mostly image based. Like, you can really live off of words here. And that's what I really enjoyed about it, because I had missed writing, and Instagram, you're not writing a lot of things. And I personally had chosen to use it as a way to share other parts of things that I was interested about. I specifically focused on mental health and also just conversations that I don't feel like a lot of people are having, especially within my community, my AAPI community, but also just outside of that as well. And so I started it for that reason. I didn't want to take the OhJoy blog and move it over there. I didn't necessarily want to start a Substack to have one more place for your usual OhJoy content. So I really took a risk by doing something totally different. And it's evolved. I mean, I really spent a good 1 year, the first year, where I was feeding it regularly, weekly. I had paid and non-paid subscribers, and it was fine. It was definitely, to me, another side part of my business. I didn't have the time to dedicate to it enough, I think, to really grow it to the potential that I think it could have been, because I had to also focus on things that were actively making money. So after a year, I ended up changing it back to all free and more occasional posts, because I do still value all the work that I put into it. And I think it's important information for people who come across it any time in the future. But it was sort of a lot for me to have to also feel like I had to feed that as well. So that's what I chose to do. But I have a lot of friends and colleagues and people that I know who it has become their main source of income or their main place where they share. And I think it can be a wonderful place if that type of content and writing that type of long form content with occasional photos mixed in is something that makes sense for what you have to say and what you have to share.
What I hear you saying in response to the question was sort of pick a lane, and pick a lane that makes the most sense relative to your own talents and what you're trying to get across. If you love to write, maybe this is a great place for you. And in all of those platforms, the key is consistency. Mm-hmm. And I know this firsthand, where I've been like, well, essentially, we're a media company for women in midlife. So my natural inclination is, well, we need to be on YouTube, and we've got this podcast, and we need to write fresh content and multiple articles every week. Oh, wait a minute. No one's going to a website, to your earlier point. Okay, we've got to package this in a newsletter and get it out to them on a regular basis. How many times do people want a newsletter to drop? And a lot of this is just figuring out what you have to say and the people that you want to say it to. What is their appetite for? How do they want to receive that information? When somebody comes to you, maybe somebody who you're coaching, one of your students, I think you call them, do you help them to unpack all of that to figure out where they belong, which social platform, or what's best not only for the demographic and the population they're serving, but for their talents? Is that sort of how you break that down?
That comes up pretty much with everybody. I mean, people who I work with are in various stages of business. Sometimes people are just starting. Sometimes people are 5, 10, 15 years in. So it really depends. But social media comes up pretty much in almost every conversation. And what ends up happening, because most of the people I work with have already started something, even if they're in the early days, and usually they have an Instagram account and a TikTok and a Pinterest. They've already set it up because everybody sort of knows, okay, I got my business name, I have my website, get all these handles, and so people have them. But what they're feeding and how often and the regularity, that's very varied. So yes, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've said this, and even in group coaching and individual coaching, to really focus on one or two places that you feel like your work can really shine. Which one is that? Is it an Instagram and Pinterest? That's where I focus my time. There are some brands I know who do amazing on Facebook, like especially niche online shops. A lot of like kids brands do really well on Facebook because their audience is just like waiting for the next drop or waiting for the next limited edition thing. And then obviously, if you're a YouTuber or somebody who has done long form videos, you know how to make those. And there are people doing amazing there too. I just think that we have to be everywhere, and we think we have to be on everything. And it's impossible unless you have multiple, a huge team and you're just like this big company and all that stuff. Sure. But if you are a small business that has a small number of employees, or maybe it's just you have to start with the things that make the most sense, and also where you enjoy it too, because it's a lot to keep cranking out content. And so you have to feel like you can have fun with it. And if you need to edit it yourself, or you need to outsource the editing, if you feel comfortable on camera, or you're getting other people from your team, you have to just sort of do something where it's okay to feel a little bit nervous about it. It's okay to step out of your comfort zone, but you shouldn't feel horrified every time to have to do it. And if you feel horrified every time, then let's rethink which format you should actually be on.
Well, we'll all have to pay attention to what horrifies us as we choose our platform. So here you are, you're having this success as a blogger. Now we're talking about like you're in this 2011 state where you're having a baby, you're fully known and recognized as a blogger, you're doing collaborations, you're still a graphic designer. So you start to infuse that into some of the projects you're taking on, whether it's private label stuff that's got OhJoy on it or whatever. When you first broke out of just blogging, what was the thing that really captured your imagination and you were excited to do more of, and how did that inform what was next for you?
So as a graphic designer, before starting my own business, I had worked at a couple different companies. One was more of a branding agency for fashion brands, and one was a fashion company that worked with Target and was one of their very first collaborations back in the early 2000s. So I was a graphic designer, but I had done both sort of corporate stuff, and I also got to design products and patterns and prints and things that went on things. And so that second job where I was getting to design things and see my things I designed at Target, that really triggered something within me, because I would kind of secretly customer shop and watch people look at the pieces, and I would see people want to buy them or ask their mom to buy it. And I said to myself, someday I want to have my own line at Target. And fast forward to around this time frame that you're talking about, Pinterest is starting to become a bigger thing, and I'm getting more well-known on Pinterest. And so I had this opportunity to pitch to Target, and I got my first line with them that was sort of tied into Pinterest. It was a party collection that's very, very pinnable, a Pinterest-worthy party collection. And after that, after the success of that, I ended up getting renewed and had a 3-year contract with them, which expanded into so many other categories. My dream categories. I did home decor, I did a pet collection, I did a baby collection, I did so many things. And it really was, to me, the beginning of sort of what I now call OhJoy 2.0, where it allowed me to get an outside office. After 8 years of working in my house, I got an outside office. It allowed me to start hiring a team. I started hiring 3 part-time people around that time when we first got our Target contract, who eventually expanded over the years into 7 full-time people. And that was the beginning, I think, of like, okay, this is this is a business. Like, this is like something, and I can really grow this, and there's more people. And slowly there were employees and a team and this thing. And I was like walking into this office every day. And it excited me not only because of the growth, but also to see something that you made in a store is thrilling. I mean, to me still, and right now I have a collection with At Home, and it is the first time in a while that we've been in a physical retail store, and it's still thrilling. Like, I bring my kids who are much older now than when I first had my Target line, and it's really something that just, as a designer and as a person who likes to make stuff, it's just the coolest thing. And so I think that was the beginning of me seeing the potential of what it could be. And also because people are coming across you and your work without you having to tell them all the time. Because sometimes online, if you are using social media to market yourself, you're feeling like you have to always sell yourself. So it's just nice sometimes for someone to just see your thing. Maybe they don't know you, and that's fine, but they just like it, and then they buy it. And they put it into their home, and it brings them joy. And that's really what everything I try to do is about, whether I'm teaching you something, whether I'm sharing a tip, whether I've made a product that you can physically buy. It's about bringing joy into your life in some small way. So I think that really was the beginning of a new chapter for me.
And the first book had been written before that.
Yes,
correct?
My first book was 2010. And then the second book, which was about blogging, it was part of that same series. It was called Blogging. It was about 2012. And then my third was 2014. And then there's some kids ones that were more recent after that.
So how did that play into this? You started to see yourself not only as a graphic designer who could do these collaborations and found the intersection of your blogging and getting joyful products into the hands of your customers, but now you're creating educational, if you will, content. Like, now you're an expert and an authority. How did that feel?
Well, I think it's one of those things where the crazy thing about being a small business owner, especially post-internet life, is that I think a lot of people, myself included, found themselves doing things they never expected because we didn't know that reaching people in this way would be a thing. Yeah. Exactly. I thought I was going to be a graphic designer, go work at an agency, work my way up to being a creative director, art director, all the things. And I never did that. So in terms of feeling like an educator, I mean, I think naturally when you start a business and you've learned more, you will naturally have people asking you for advice. And especially at that point when I had a blog and I had some sort of social media presence, this is pre-Instagram, people were asking me for advice. And there were different apps along the way that came along where there were different places where people could ask you advice and you could answer there, or people would just email me or whatever it was. And so I realized about 5 years in that, I could teach people, or I could give one-on-one courses. And so I started doing that around 2010. I think I started doing that. I remember I was pregnant when I was starting to teach classes and workshops, and I would teach people about freelancing. I would teach people about blogging. And I just have always been the person that when I learn something, I want to help other people with what I've learned. Yeah. And it's not to say that I can save them from all their mistakes, because we know mistakes are good. But if I can teach you things that I've learned to help you, just the things that I wish I knew, it's always that. I wish I knew this. And now that I know it, I want to tell you. I want to share it with you. And I want to give you my point of view and all of that. And I'm not the right coach or teacher for everybody, but for the people that I am the right coach or teacher for, it's one of those things where, to me, it's so gratifying to see somebody who wants to start a small business or has a small business to help them grow that. Because there's not a lot of things. Now there's more resources. Now there's different sites and apps you can go to, and you can connect with people and all of that. But back then, it wasn't as easy to find people who were like me, where I was a small business and I could help you, and just supporting other women too. I mean, most of my students are women, and I think that women especially have a hard time asking for help. They have a hard time like they feel like they have to do everything. And it's like, it's a mix of things. They have a hard time asking for help. They have a hard time delegating. They have a hard time just saying, hey, I don't know how to do this and I need help. And that is one thing that I'm always trying to break down as well. Not only within our relationship, but also as they're growing a team, with their family, with their partners at home, understanding that you can't run a successful business and do everything at home and be perfect 100% of the time and not ever have any guilt. And also like all these things, there's so much happening. And so that's also been part of one of my personal missions. It's like working moms and the juggle and all the things that happen, because we've all been there and we know how hard it is, and knowing that you're not alone. But also, how do we make it work? Because people always say, Joy, it feels like you're doing so many things. I don't know how you do all of that. And I'm not doing everything by myself. Sometimes I am, but it's a mix. Like so many people are at play, where whether it's like your partner is helping out with this thing, whether you have childcare, whether you have an assistant, whether you have employees, whether you have friends who are helping you with drop off and pickup, whatever it is, there's always multiple people that you have to start relying on to be there to help you.
Thank you for being honest. I often say on the podcast, if we're not telling the truth, we're not really empowering anybody. So thank you for that. And also, as you're talking about yourself as a teacher, it's one thing and there's lots of people now who you can learn from that are offering great courses, and you can access information like never before. What's unique, I think, about what you're offering is you actually have done the work and are still doing the work as a business owner. So you're in the trenches, pulling out your best practices and sharing them with other people. And that's unique. That's different. Most people teach from an area of expertise, and they become such an expert at that one thing that sometimes they can have blinders on as to all the other things that have to work in concert with that one thing. So I think that makes your situation unique and you uniquely qualified to be able to teach. The other thing I want to touch on is all the things you said around motherhood, parenting, being a partner, running a business, all of this craziness that's happening. You, on top of having that, like many of us who are founders, you were also keeping a lot of plates spinning because you had this success, and this success was growing as you were becoming a mother, ultimately a mother of two. You built a house. You wrote 7 books. We've touched on some of them. You did all these things. How did you start to approach, in the trenches, in the midst of it, how did you start to approach your work and say, wait a minute, I've got to pull back on something. I've got to create some healthy boundaries here, because it's very easy to get stuck in a cycle and all of a sudden years have passed and you don't realize the damage you're doing.
So that, great question. Right before COVID, I remember it was the December 2019 to January 2020. Around that Christmas break, I always gave my team 2 weeks off. We took like the full break off. And I was always very excited, not only for a break, but also just whatever the new year holds. And I just remember not going into 2020 with the same level of excitement that I had in the past. I was very stressed. We were no longer in our target contract, but I had 10 to 12 licensing partnerships per year. We had a lot of social media work. We were very busy, and a growing team where every year salaries need to increase and everything increases. I was sort of at this brink of having a team of 7 where I either needed to take outside investment, which I had never done, to be able to get more people, to get a C-suite person, somebody who could manage. I was sort of at my brink of how can I manage all of these people, plus do my job, plus be around for my kids. And I was maxed out. I was working in the daytime at the office with my team. I was coming home with my kids, family time. They would put them to bed at 7 o'clock. I would work from 8 till midnight. And I was doing this for years. At this point, my kids are still younger, but they're not babies anymore. And I was hustling and I was loving it for the most part, but I got to the point where I didn't know it, but my body was just telling me something was wrong. And I got super sick in January of 2020. I had never gotten that sick before. I thought it was the flu. Maybe it was early COVID, who knows? But I remember being so sick that I didn't even go into the office. And remember, this is back in the day when we still went into our offices, even when we were sick, because that's what we all did. So I stayed home and I worked from home. And I just was realizing like how much peace I felt with the simplicity of it just being me. And I was financially stressed. Every penny was going to something. And it just was not a good feeling. And I part of me was like, what is going on? Because I had had so much success and I had done so many things and we had so many things. And I grew and grew and grew and grew. And on the outside, I was what you look at as success and growth and small business and bootstraps, women owned, whatever. But inside, I was really not happy. And I don't think I realized it until I got really sick in that early 2020. So anyway, within the matter of a month, it happened very fast. I had like a real talk with my accountant. I had a real talk with my husband about like my business. Like he's not in my business, but he's just very smart about that kind of stuff. He's always been able to give me good feedback. I had a real talk with a couple of friends who had recently downsized their team. And within a month, I had made the decision to downsize my team and let go of 5 people and keep just 1. And it was heartbreaking. It was awful because no one did anything wrong. We were busy, it wasn't like we were in a recession. This is pre-COVID, so we had no idea what was coming, but from the outside, everything seemed fine. They had no idea. And so it was a combination of a financial decision and a combination of my mental health because I didn't realize I was unhappy, but I was unhappy. And some of it, and again, it has nothing to do with them. And I think that was the hard part, when I decided to let most of them go, it felt very personal for them, but it wasn't. And I'm still friends with many of them to this day. And it was just something that felt very scary, but ended up being the decision that now has taken me to this new part of my career and my life. I could have taken investment. I have a friend who started a huge company and sold it. And I have lots of friends who have investors and people who run like multi-figure $1 million businesses that were like, Joy, you could blow this thing up, and positive blow up, not the negative blow up. Sure. And just wasn't feeling like me. I just could not see myself running a company with investors, with that type of business. And I decided to simplify. So in February 2020, I made that change. I moved out of my big studio. Little did I know that COVID was right around the corner. So it was crazy trying to get a new tenant for this studio while COVID was happening and everybody was home and we were masking, early days of masking where you didn't know if the masks were helping, all these things. And it took a good year to really get to this new chapter because of COVID and because the one person that I had kept, we couldn't even work together in the same office. We were working remotely. I moved into my new house, which we had spent 6.5 years building. My kids were home doing Zoom school. It was insane, as all of us who are parents in 2020 know. It was insane. Plus, I was going through this change in my own business and my own career. But I can tell you now, 4 years later, and now I actually have no employees. I have let go of my final employee last year, who I loved and I adore, and she was with me for 7 years by the time that I decided to do this. I've just sort of evolved my company to a place where I can manage the work that I want to do on my own. And I say on my own in-house. I still have some freelancers I work with. I still have a lawyer. I have my agents who help me. Like, there are people who are helping me do my thing. So I cannot say I'm ever doing it 100% alone. But in terms of the day-to-day And in terms of staff, I am the only person now. And what it's allowed me to do is to focus on the work that I love the most and bring in the income that will help cover my family and my contribution to our family and our needs, but I'm not having to cover multiple other people. And it's just taken such a big weight off of me, because I think that I was the type of boss where I cared so much about everybody and their livelihood and their love of their job and their work-life balance, that I didn't have that when I was doing it. And in hindsight, I learned a lot of things I could have done differently. I think I put everybody else before me. I think that I promised too many things that I didn't know how I was going to keep my end of the promise, because I wanted everybody to have everything they wanted. And if I were to ever do it again, I would do things slightly differently from a business perspective, not from a human resources perspective. I think that I was a pretty good boss, but from a business perspective. And I realized I was just figuring things out as I went, because that's what I did. I didn't have any formal business training. And it's got me to a great place, but it also was something where I had to learn a lot of things the hard way.
Even with formal business training, people find themselves in those situations. Those decisions come with the wisdom that comes with age, right? With living through them and saying, well, wait a minute, am I who I thought I was going to be in this situation? Am I responding in that same way? Whenever we make those decisions, we're mourning something, right? There's something that goes away. There's a decision that we've made. A yes to something is a no to something else. Mm-hmm. Even when you talked about being an art director or creative director and that didn't happen, most people would look from the outside and say, it didn't need to happen. You're an art director and a creative director for your own brand. Like, what's better than that? But when you said that, I was like, yeah, even when we're saying yes to something that feels so great and is aligned with where we are at that point, we have said no to something else. Mm-hmm. Would you say that that's the season that really prompted you to, I'm going back to your Substack conversation, that prompted you to write about mental health?
I think so. It was a combination of things. I mean, I think that it took me some time to finally be at peace with that decision. I think maybe only this year, 3 years later, that I actually feel at peace with it. I think I felt a lot of guilt for a while because I was worried about where everybody went and them getting new jobs. And I just felt very motherly, protective over everybody and wanting to make sure they landed in a good place. I think then also COVID happened. So a lot of things work-wise, in some cases, there were some years that unexpectedly were amazing. And there are some years that have been like super slow, and just sort of figuring out the balance of that. And I think the Substack really came out of a lot of things that I just went through and processed over the last few years post-COVID, and the things that maybe I never let myself process before then, or the things that I've seen happen and things that we don't talk about within mental health, that I've seen things, sad things happen because of that, or sad conversations or unfortunate incidences, or, people I care about who didn't get the help that they needed or are finally getting the help they needed. Things that just, I think we all woke up a little bit to mental health and the need for it. A lot of stuff happened in 2020, not just COVID, but a lot of things like politically and socially and in the world that made everybody wake up in various ways and see what's important to them. And I think also just part of it is the authenticity of, we've left that picture perfect world of social media, and it's a little different now. It's not 100% all real honesty all the time. People still curate. But I think everybody wants human connection, and everybody wants to know they're not alone, and they want to know that they're going through stuff just like I do, just like we do. Even the people who are the ones sharing the things, we want to feel connected to, that we're not alone. And wherever we find that, whether it's in real life, whether it's virtually, whether it's on social media, whether it's at a conference, everybody wants connection of some sort.
It's not lost on me that a brand by your name OhJoy, Joy Cho, would then have a Substack called Crazy Mad Joy about mental health. And I mean, there's something really profound about that. And it holds up to the light. How do we both pursue this life of joy, but also take into consideration all that we are and where we need support and where we need help. And I can only imagine how many people were impacted by those letters, that journaling that you were doing, and sharing that so openly. How are you now? Are you calling this OhJoy 3.0?
I'm in 4.0 now.
4.0. So 3.0
Yes.
would have been what?
3.0 was sort of post-COVID.
Okay.
A team of two, getting through it, but making it work. We 2 people doing the job of previously 7 people, but somehow we managed to do it. And so now I'm calling this 4.0. And 4.0, this is my season of focusing on the things that I love to do the most, reminding myself that I get to do these things. Because I also think when we approach our middle years and we've been doing a job for so long, we start to sometimes get a little bit cranky about it. And I got cranky in the last few years. I for sure went through a midlife crisis. I can say that now because I've gone through it. For a couple years where I just was over everything. I was not happy about work. I just was having a hard time with a lot of things in my life that I've been doing for so long. And work was probably one of the main ones. And I had to come through and realize that I get to do this. Now I don't have to do every single part of it. Some parts I do. Not everything is going to be amazing all the time. Not everything is going to be, I love, love, love. There's obviously parts of having a business that are annoying or not fun. But I've really come to say, look at this thing that I've created. I get to share with people. I still have a voice. I still have a vision that people like. Some people love, whatever variation of that. And also, I sort of put out into the world for myself, manifest or whatever you call it, is that I wanted to live a life where I could be flexible, be able to drop my children off at school, pick them up, be available for their afternoon sports events, and also still work. And it doesn't seem so outlandish. It doesn't, because there are people who are doing it. But I didn't make that my priority, all those things before, when I had people, when I had a team, when I had an office, because I assumed I had to be a certain way. And I've been trying to break apart what I assume. I assumed I had to work 40 to 50 hours a week at a minimum. But now the more organic nature of how I work is that some days I'm working a full day. Some days I'm working 1 hour. Some it's 4, some it's 5. But it all balances out because I get my work done. I know what I'm doing. I've done this type of work for so long. And then I also can go to the game, to the kids' sports game, whatever that is. I can still be there if I want to volunteer and do something at school. And to me, that's the best of both worlds. And honestly, I'll tell you, the thing that changed it, which I know we didn't really talk about, is that I started a couple years ago getting back into competitive tennis. I was a tennis player in high school and my high school team, played off and on in my 20s and 30s. I had my kids start when they were 4, and they were taking their lessons during COVID because it was the only thing you could do that was safe. And I was like, why am I not playing? Like, why are my kids playing and I'm not playing? So I started playing again. I ended up joining an adult tennis league. I'm now the captain of a couple teams. And even though the sport wasn't new for me, it was the newness of doing this in my 40s that brought me this feeling of that I had not experienced in a while. Because when you're in your middle years, you've probably been doing the same thing. Either your job, you maybe have been with the same partner, you probably have the same friends, you live maybe in the same house. So you're not often having new experiences in your middle years. And to have a new experience in my middle years, which was playing the sport that I loved as a kid, as an adult again, but playing now as an adult with my adult 40-something body, which was way different than my teen body, but also being competitive because I play USTA matches and not always winning, especially in the beginning, because career-wise, I felt like I had reached a certain level. And then here I am doing something where other people are the ones winning. Other people are the ones who have done it longer. And I'm this newbie here. And while it sounds like it could be frustrating, it was actually very empowering for me. And I took that feeling of joy, if you will, that I got from playing tennis again. And I said, oh, that's what it's like to love what you're doing. And I had lost that for a little bit with work. I had lost that spark, if you will. And I found it again because of tennis and because it reminded me what it was like. And I swear to you that change brought me out of my midlife crisis. It improved my relationship with my husband. It improved the way that I am as a mom. It improved my outlook on my work. I'm not saying everybody out there go play tennis. That's not the thing.
Sure.
It's just the idea that when we are feeling stuck, which I was, we have to find something that's just for us that gives us that spark again. And getting that spark again will help us get out of the funk of everything else. And that's not to say that maybe some of those things in your life are not broken or need fixing. They might. But we need to feel excited about something. And what that is for you, it could be a hobby, it could be a sport, there's so many different things it could be. And I don't know what that is for each person, but it really did change my life at this stage of life. And it's allowed me, I think, to be able to have something for myself that's what we need. We're giving to so many people, especially if you're a working mom, you're doing everything for everybody. And what is it that you do for yourself? And for me, it was this. Yeah. And also for my kids to see it, for them to see, oh, mom has to go to a match, or like, oh, I lost my match today, or I won my match today, and them celebrating with me, or being like, oh, mom, don't worry, you'll get it next time. Like, that's one thing I've always learned in my life with mom guilt or being a working mom, is that you're modeling things for your children, whether it's that they see a mom who loves her job and who can be successful at it, where they see a mom who's busting her ass because being a self-employed person is not easy and it's not contained within a 40-hour work week, whether they see a mom who's, tired because she's doing so many things, or they see a mom who's like found her new joy because she's discovered a hobby again. And I think those are all things that we do for ourselves, and whether we feel guilty for them or not is something that we choose to feel guilt or not, but also remember that our kids are learning great things from us when we take care of ourselves.
Thank you for wrapping up this podcast, Joy. I don't think we need to say any more, but really profound lessons in that about caring for ourselves, about who's watching, who's paying attention, how do we model for our kids a life that's not just, look, mommy's working, that means I can work too, especially I think if you're a little girl, but also, look, mommy's taking care of herself. I think you gave us permission to really reflect on what is important. And just because we're having success in something doesn't mean we can't take some things back for ourselves. That success doesn't need to be the thing that leads us on a path. We still are in control of this life that we want to live. So thank you for all of those words. One last question for you. Mm-hmm. What is it that launching all things OhJoy, how would you say that has liberated you?
I think it's just the idea that you can make whatever you want. Like, you can make your life however you want it to be. And I think that when people say that, it can sound so easy because you're seeing somebody who maybe has already done it. But I think it's just the idea that I think when I grew up, I felt so locked into, you have to pick this job and you have to pick this career, and then you just have this path. And some jobs are like that because there is a hierarchy, or you have to go to a certain training or school or whatever. But the path that I particularly chose, which I thought had a linear path, ended up being so all over the place. And so there's that part, but there's also the part that you can try stuff and it doesn't work out, and it's okay. I've tried parts of my business that has failed. There's multiple things that I didn't even mention in this podcast because there's not enough time, but that I've tried, and I would give everything 2 years. And if they didn't work out, if they didn't seem worth it, or I wasn't enjoying it, or it wasn't profitable, I would let it go and I would move on. And then we would focus on other things. And so I think it's just the fact that you don't have to be locked into anything. You can change as you go. You can modify as you go. And also when you want to change, it doesn't mean completely dropping everything. There was a time a couple years ago when I was having a funk with my career that I thought maybe this is it. Maybe I need to go get a job for someone else and change my career completely. But what I wasn't seeing in that moment that I know now was that no, I just had to shift and I had to modify what I was working on and start leaning towards the things that I enjoyed more that maybe at the time weren't making as much money. But when I started leaning into them, they did start making more money because that's where I wanted to go. And that's where my mindset was going. And that's what I was putting out there into the world. And so I think it's just knowing that we're not stuck. Things can always change. Things can always be modified. That's why I don't do 5 or 10 year plans anymore. Where do you see yourself 5 years in the future, 10 years? Like, I hate that question. Thank you for not asking it. Because it's too long from now. Yeah. You just don't know each year by year, like what's going to change in your mind and with your family and your life, that you just need to pivot a little bit each time.
Yeah. Joy, thank you. Thank you for hanging out with us and sharing your story and so much wisdom along the way. I appreciate you and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And Liberty listeners, thank you guys for tuning in and hanging out with Joy and with me. And we will talk to you guys next week. Bye for now. Liberty Road is broadcast on all platforms: Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and more. If you like what you've heard, please follow, rate, and review Liberty Road on Apple Podcast and Spotify. It helps us to know if these episodes are inspiring and equipping you to move into your middle third with intention. Liberty Road is created by executive producer Netta Jones, supervising producer Elizabeth Wyndham, producer Julia Wyndham, and music by Jack Jones.
To make switching to the new Boost Mobile risk-free, we're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
So why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Because you have nothing to lose. Boost Mobile is offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
No, I asked why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Oh.
Wouldn't.
Because you love wasting money as a way to punish yourself because your mother never showed you enough love as a child?
Whoa. Easy there.
Yeah.
Applies to online activations. Requires port in and auto pay. Customers activating in stores may be charged non-refundable activation fees.
Let's talk about something that's not always top of mind, but still really important: life insurance. Why? Because it offers financial protection for your loved ones and can help them pay for things like a mortgage, credit card debt. It can even help fund an education. And guess what? Life insurance is probably a lot more affordable than you think. In fact, most people think life insurance is 3 times more expensive than it is. So with State Farm Life Insurance, you can protect your loved ones without breaking the bank. Not sure where to start? State Farm has over 19,000 local agents that can help you choose an option to fit your needs and budget. Get started today and contact a State Farm agent or go to statefarm.com.
At Jiffy Lube, we car about cars. In fact, we're kinda obsessed. That's why we've been taking care of business with quick quality oil changes and service for over 40 years. And with things like our Carful Vehicle Review, where our experts will check, fill, clean, and inspect your vehicle, you'll know we'll car for your car like we car for our own. Jiffy Lube. Car more.
Visit jiffylubedc.com to find a Jiffy Lube service center near you.